Welcome to Dr. Mensch, the radio show that takes a real, compassionate look at mental health from A to Z. Join child and adolescent psychiatrist Dr. Gil Lichtshein each week as we explore topics that matter: autism, ADHD, anxiety, depression, OCD, schizophrenia, behavioral challenges, neurodevelopmental disorders, and more. No stigma, no judgment. Just honest conversations, new therapies, breakthrough treatments, and real solutions for real people. Mental health is not a weakness. It's a treatable medical condition, and help is available. Join the conversation now by calling the studio at 888-994-4995, Studio A. This is Dr. Mensch, where hope and healing begin.
Good morning. Usually I'm here in the afternoons, but it's Monday morning. I'm Dr. Gil Lichtshein, aka Dr. Mensch. I'm a board-certified child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist. My office is in Boca Raton, Florida. My office is located at 7100 West Camino Real, Suite 404 in Boca Raton. My phone number 561-300-4052. I'm usually here in the afternoons on Mondays, so it's a little bit of a change in my schedule and getting used to being here at in the morning time. Today I wanted to talk about something, maybe not directly related to mental health, but perhaps indirectly it is kind of discussing, the events of Saturday night and what happened to the president at the correspondence dinner. I was out to dinner on Saturday, and I was in Miami at dinner, and I wasn't paying attention to the news. I was actually hoping that the restaurant where I was having dinner was going to have the Knicks game on, and they didn't, but the Knicks wound up winning. I was driving home. I had my cell phone in my pocket, and it kept buzzing, and I was just thinking, it was probably a couple people just trying to reach me. They could wait till I got home. When I got home and took out my phone, I saw, a friend of mine texted me, "They try to kill Trump." And I was like, what are you talking about? And, I get home and I turn on various, flipping between Fox News, Newsmax, CNN, and all they're talking about is what was going on at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, that apparently some individual, the dinner was held at the Washington Hilton in a ballroom, and some individual, rushed the security in front of near the ballroom where the dinner was taking place, and he got, apprehended. And it's just kind of shocking to me to be like, oh, here we go again. That, after, the president had two other attempts on his life. I mean, this was when he was running for re-election, but still, it's kind of unbelievable that, someone, and it turns out that, he had written this manifesto where he expressed some disdain for the current administration. I mean, I didn't read the whole thing, so I don't know the details, but clearly this gentleman, who seemed to be an educated individual, went to Caltech, so we're not talking about some, uneducated, individual, someone, with advanced education, we think learned, an intellectual who, seems to have taken his dislike, animosity, hatred, whatever word you want to use, towards the president to the point where he wanted to hurt him. And it's kind of, amazing and just kind of unbelievable, this level of violence that has kind of been seen directed towards political figures. We have the Charlie Kirk assassination in September. We had those, I don't know if they were local or state elected officials in Minnesota that were killed. We had, the two attempts on President Trump, and you got to wonder when enough's enough. It's also not helping matters that when you listen to the news or go on social media and you have, political figures, from both sides of the aisle, but it seems to be more from the more left-leaning figures that, kind of resort to, I'm not saying exhorting or encouraging violence, but having kind of like violent rhetoric. And, unfortunately, if you continue to say certain things over and over, there are going to be people who are going to believe it to be true. If you say something to somebody, like if you're in a relationship and you tell your partner you're stupid, you're dumb, you're this, you're that, and you keep saying it over and over and over again, no matter how intelligent a person is, how educated or sophisticated a person is, the person who's hearing it at some point might actually think, okay, maybe this other person is what he or she is saying. There might be some kernel of truth to what they're saying. And so, when you turn on the TV and you hear things like the other day, I think it was earlier in last week, the minority leader of the House, Hakeem Jeffries, someone who I don't really have much of a respect for because, of his connection to his uncle Leonard Jeffries, who was a avowed and known anti-Semite. But he said something to the extent of, we have to battle and go to war with the Republicans. And in today's environment and society that we're in, that kind of rhetoric, might, cause actual violence. You've had other politicians. I remember Maxine Waters, who has said in the past, we got to go harass Republican lawmakers. We need to fight them. We need to battle them. We need to, harass them and attack them. I mean, that's words that, could be argued, that could incite a reaction. And I'll give you a personal example that I've experienced. It was soon after the election in which Trump was reelected. My mother had fractured her hip, and my late mother fractured her hip, and she was in a rehab facility recuperating after surgery. My mother was no friend of President Trump. She knew that I voted for him and I supported him, but we didn't, it wasn't like some bone of contention where I didn't speak to my mom or she disavowed or disowned me. It's just something we agreed to disagree. So I went to visit her, and there was some back and forth banter about Trump, and as we were talking, this woman walks in the room. I've never met her before. It turned out it was like a distant cousin of mine who I've heard of but never met, really didn't know much about her. And so I was like figuring, okay, this could be an opportunity of meeting her and getting to know her. So as she walked in and introduced herself, my mom made some kind of inside joke about at that point, President-elect Trump, and she and I, started laughing, and that must have set something off in my cousin that, she went to a dark place that I couldn't bring her out of, and automatically, before even trying to know who I am or anything about me, she looked at me and she's like, "Did you vote for Donald Trump?" And I'm like, "Yes, I did." And I'm like, "What's the problem?" And all of a sudden, boom, the first thing that comes out of her mouth is, she called me a Nazi. And she's like, "I voted for Hitler." And I'm like sitting there like wondering, where did this come from? I voted for Hitler, I'm a Nazi? I mean, and I'm trying to ask, ask her why would you say that? I mean, what grounds do you have to say that? And I couldn't even get a conversation with her because she just kept rolling on about how he's going to put people in concentration camps, he's going to murder black people, he's going to do this, he's going to do that. And I'm just sitting there listening to this, and I'm trying to, calmly just say, okay, maybe let's talk about something else. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Couldn't happen. I mean, she just kept, going on and about how Trump is Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Benito Mussolini, Pol Pot, Genghis Khan, all in one. And I realized at that point that, as if that she's had something called delusional disorder, that you can't really talk to someone who's delusional. You can't You don't want to reaffirm or enable their delusions, but then at the same time, questioning it directly and calling them crazy doesn't help either. So I was just trying to say, okay, we obviously agree to disagree, and I'm fine with that. And it's unfortunate you feel that way. I don't feel the same way about your candidate, and let's just try to move on. But that was what I was trying to do, but she just wouldn't have any of that and just kept going on and on and on, and it got to the point where she finally just decided that she felt uncomfortable around me, walked up and left. And I've never heard from her since, nor do I really want to hear from her, because to me that was someone who, and this is not a clinical term, but she was unhinged. And it made me realize, this whole thing about Trump derangement syndrome, I really do think it exists. It's a serious psychiatric disorder, a form of delusional disorder where these individuals believe certain things to be true despite the lack of evidence to support it. And it just kind of got me to realize that this woman didn't want to get to know me, didn't want to, establish some type of relationship with me simply because I voted for Donald Trump. And in her mind, I voted for Hitler, and that therefore, in her mind, I'm a Nazi. I'm Jewish, she's Jewish, and I just took offense to even the fact that she would call me a Nazi. But in her mind, I'm a Nazi because I voted for Adolf Hitler. And it's kind of unfortunate because, I would have liked to have gotten to know her and was trying to give her the opportunity, but she wouldn't have anything to do with it. But I think this is kind of like an example of where, the country's at, and it gets to the point where people are so inflamed. I don't even want to use passionate, because this is kind of a passion that's become pathological. So I'll say inflamed, heightened, that to the point where, someone would want to kill a politician because they didn't agree with what they said or think that they might be the devil reincarnate. Now, I'm an individual where, I didn't particularly care for our previous president. I had no appreciation for the other candidate, but I had never would ever dream of or consider doing anything violent to stop it. To me, it's like, you don't like our current administration, go to the ballot box and vote and cast your vote. Instead of just sitting home and protesting, do something about it. Run for office. Contribute to the candidate you want to vote for. Go to political rallies in support of your candidate. Or actually just vote for the candidate instead of deciding, I'm going to take the law into my own hand and I'm going to shoot that person and kill that person, because honestly, that doesn't solve anything. So if, let's say, that person succeeded on Saturday night and shot and killed President Trump, well then, in many people's minds, Hermann Goering would have taken over, or using the analogy of everybody calling him Hitler, his next in command would have taken over J.D. Vance. Then what? You're going to kill J.D. Vance, and then you'll have Rudolph Hess, Marco Rubio, or Mike Johnson take over. So what are you going to do then? Kill him? I mean, where does it end? And things like that got to stop. And the one thing we need to happen is for these leaders, these political leaders, both parties, come up and say this has got to stop. For former President Barack Obama to come out and say, well, I don't really know why this assailant, what his motives were. To me, it's like, dude, you're an educated man. I think you went to Harvard Law School. You're supposedly a pretty intelligent individual, lawyer, former president. And for you to say something to me stupid, where you have a manifesto which the person clearly said, I don't like Donald Trump, I don't like what he stands for, and for you to say, well, I don't really know what his intentions or motives were, that doesn't help matters. Come out and be united and stand for what makes sense, what's rational, what's civilized. There is no place for this type of hatred, for this type of violent rhetoric, and for this type of behavior. I mean, I can't imagine that, for example, President Obama and President Trump hate each other's guts. I mean, I think it was at George H.W. Bush's funeral, or maybe it was Barbara Bush's funeral. It was a funeral. I think the most recent president who died, I think it was President Bush, the elder, George H.W. At his funeral, I think it was still when Trump was first term. They're sitting at the church where the funeral, and Trump and Obama are sitting next to each other, and they're like joking and laughing. I mean, to me, if Obama and Trump really, really hated each other's guts, if Obama really thought President Trump was Adolf Hitler reincarnated and was their mortal enemy, I don't think you'd be sitting next to each other at a funeral and joking and laughing at each other or with each other. You'd probably sit at opposite ends of the room, or not even be close to each other, not even acknowledge each other. So this kind of, what seems like hatred between the two, I think they both respect each other, and I think that they would actually be very cordial to each other. Everybody needs to come together and kind of condemn this type of behavior. On that note, we're going to take a brief commercial break.
What happens when the mind of a healer crosses over into the darkness of the human soul? From authors David Icovetti, Dr. Gil Lichtshein, and Yolanda DeLuca comes a chilling psychological thriller, Dr. Mensch, A Prescription for Evil. This gripping novel follows a respected Boca Raton psychiatrist who secretly descends into madness, transforming into a modern-day king of the underworld. Inspired by true events and Dr. Gil's childhood connection to a mob family, this story blurs the line between sanity and evil, genius and destruction. Unforgettable, disturbing, impossible to put down. Get your copy today on Amazon.com. Dr. Mensch, A Prescription for Evil, a 2020 psychological crime thriller. You're listening to Dr. Mensch with child and adolescent psychiatrist Dr. Gil Lichtshein. For a copy of his powerful new book, Dr. Mensch's Prescription for Evil, visit Amazon.com. For more information or to schedule a consultation, contact Dr. Gil directly at 561-300-4052 or visit docgil.com. Now, let's get back to the show.
Welcome back to Dr. Mensch. This is Dr. Gil Lichtshein, aka Dr. Mensch, talking about the events that transpired Saturday night at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which I think is a annual dinner where, I don't want to say it's a roast, but it's kind of a dinner where you have obviously the president and members of the administration attending, but you got the White House press, and I don't know if other journalists are invited, but you get journalists from every media outlet. So you're going to get journalists from right-wing outlets, left-wing outlets, middle-of-the-road outlets. So you might have a journalist from MSNBC or DNC is called, MS Now I think they're called. You might have Keith Olbermann's no longer, but let's say someone like a Keith Olbermann or Joy Reid sitting down next to, I don't know, Sean Hannity, and for one night, they kind of put aside their political differences and they're all there together to celebrate and honor and have a good time. So clearly, things like this happen and can happen. And so all this kind of hateful rhetoric has become completely out of control, and to the point where certain people are actually taking it to the next step and, carrying out violence. Charlie Kirk's murder, assassination, death, killing back in September. I mean, Charlie Kirk wasn't a politician per se. He wasn't he was running Turning Point USA. He was a young man. I believe he was only like 30 or 31 years old, maybe early 30s, father. And, yes, he was conservative. So again, people who were not of that persuasion may not have liked him or agreed with his views and philosophies. But, he would go around the country and try to have dialogue with people, and instead of like saying I'm right, you're wrong, if you're not right wing, you're against us. He's like, hey, okay, you don't agree with me, let's talk. Let's try to figure out what makes us different, what makes us similar, and then in the end, we may not agree on everything, but sometimes you might agree more than you think, or then the other things that you don't agree on, you just agree to disagree. And he gets killed because the shooter, I guess, didn't like what he stood for. Okay, like I said, I don't like what Kamala Harris stood for and the Democratic Party and their anti-Israel and anti-Semitic stances, but I don't go and do something violent to change that, because honestly, that won't change anything. So the way I did it was I went to the ballot box and I voted for Donald Trump. That was my way of saying I don't want a party that I perceive as being anti-Semitic or representing anti-Semitism and anti-Israel views to be in power, so I voted for the other party. I didn't go and do something to try to hurt any candidate, because that's not going to fix anything or solve anything. It's only going to broaden the divide and cause more division and strife. And this division that has really permeated every aspect of American society has got to stop. We can't live in fear. I mean, President Trump was saying this correspondence dinner needs to continue. He's right, but maybe now this what transpired Saturday night. President Trump wanted to build a ballroom in the White House that has raised so much controversy. But you know what? At least if such an event isn't at the White House, it's very secure. This event was at a hotel, and apparently there was no security apparatus outside the hotel, so that if I was, I'm assuming, let's say I was staying at the hotel that weekend just by coincidence, I could have come and gone easily outside the hotel into my room. But what would have stopped me from deciding, I'm going to bum rush the White House, I'm going to crash the White House Correspondence' Dinner. I'm going to be like a dinner crasher, like the movie Wedding Crash. I'm going to be Owen Wilson, or I'm going to be Vince Vaughn. And I'm going to dress in a nice tuxedo and a bow tie, and I'm just going to walk right into the dinner. What would have stopped me? I don't know. So, I mean, the fact that if you're a politician on one side of the aisle or the other, and you have to worry, okay, do I need extra protection or extra security, or do I not say certain things because I'm worried that someone in the audience might not like what I say and then might actually shoot me or try to hurt me? I mean, that's what it's come down to, and it's just kind of unfortunate. History of this country. How many presidents have been assassinated? We've had Abraham Lincoln, James Garfield, William McKinley, and John F. Kennedy, I believe 4. I mean, there have been other assassination attempts. We had Ronald Reagan, Gerald Ford twice, Donald Trump, FDR, I believe he was president-elect when they tried to assassinate him. I can't think of any others. So, but President Trump's the first president where they've now had 3 attempts on his life, and all within, 2 of them were when he was not the president, but he was running for president. But nonetheless, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. This level of violence has got to stop. The level of hateful rhetoric has got to stop. These politicians are people we elected. We expect more from them. They're supposedly representing their constituents. I don't want my congressman or congresswoman or senator to be in Congress saying, let's wage war against the president. Let's harass or let's attack members of the opposite party. No, I don't want to hear that. I actually, you hear me. If John Fetterman threw his hat in for president, I actually might vote for him. I don't care that he's a Democrat. The guy is very, if anything, the politician that had brain damage, he had a stroke 3 or 4 years ago. People were saying he shouldn't even run for Senate. This is the guy that's making most sense in his own party. The guy that change the whole dress code of the Senate, where he'd come in wearing hoodies and shorts. This guy is a man of reason, and we need more John Fettermans in Congress, in positions of power. He's level-headed. He's like, let's tone this rhetoric. He even said, this TDS has got to stop. You know, we need to come together, and we need to figure this out. Violence doesn't solve anything. Egging people on to commit violence doesn't solve anything. Going on the TV and saying Donald Trump or this person or that person's Adolf Hitler or Joseph Stalin doesn't help anything, doesn't solve anything. It only creates more problems. So if anything, I think we need to just take this rhetoric down a lot, and as civilized human beings and as educated human beings, we need to come together. It doesn't matter, Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, progressive, LGBTQ, whatever you are, it doesn't make a difference. We all together want this country to be better. We all want to make this country and this world safer, more secure. Let's just come together and figure that out. Despite what may be our political differences or philosophical differences, we can agree to disagree. On that note, this is Dr. Gil Lichtshein, aka Dr. Mensch. Hope everybody has a good rest of your day and a good week. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us for Dr. Mensch with Dr. Gil Lichtshein, helping you navigate the world of mental health with clarity and care. If you or someone you love needs support, you're not alone. Treatment works and recovery is possible. To schedule a consultation or discuss non-medication therapies, personalized treatment plans, or psychiatric care, contact Dr. Gil directly at 561-300-4052 or visit docgil.com. You can catch us each week on South Florida Oldies Radio and streaming across all social platforms. Until next time.